This is a car that really lived up to its name, swiftly becoming a bestseller after its launch in 2005. 2011 saw the second generation of the Maruti Suzuki Swift. And talk about success, 1.7 million of these sold in India up till today. And that's not counting the Dzire, just the Swift alone. Well, there wasn't much difference between the first gen and the second gen in the way that they looked. But this time around, as you can see, Maruti are taking a big leap forward with the third generation of the Swift. While the overall shape is still largely familiar, there are big changes that make the Swift bolder and more modern. The biggest change is up front with a very large hexagonal grille on its nose. Swept back angular full LED headlamps with DRLs and an air dam that underlines the grille, thinly curling up around the fog housings on the side. But this is familiar. Why? Because we've seen this nose on the Swift Dzire compact sedan already. Around the side and back, it's instantly recognizable with its distinct two-box silhouette, blackened pillars and wide haunches. The longer wheelbase makes the Swift look a class bigger, and the shoulder line is more pronounced, especially at the rear, which leads into bulging taillights that are more rounded and similar in style to its sibling, the Baleno. The 15-inch wheels look a tad undersized, and we wish Maruti had given the 16 inches you find on the International Swift. Now, an interesting styling detail is here in the C-pillar section, where the handle is no longer on the waistline, but it is tucked away flush at the top in this blackened out area. And this area also makes the roof a sort of a floating structure. Handles like this, well, we've seen them on cars before too. The new Swift feels more grown up with more space on offer just about everywhere. Now, you can tell that this car has grown in dimensions, especially when you sit in the back seat. There is more leg room, it feels a little wider, and there's more headroom at the back as well. Suzuki has addressed what is possibly the Swift's biggest weakness, boot space. The older car had just 204 litres, barely enough for a couple of small bags. In fact, the limited boot capacity is what pushed many buyers to the Swift Dzire. There should be no issues now, as it is a substantial 268 litres. It's deep enough to take the two big bags, but like before, the loading lip to lift your bags is quite high. On the inside, though the look has changed, the leap in quality isn't as much as you'd expect on an all-new car. There are still some shiny plastics, and focus has been on keeping costs tight. And that does show up in some areas like the switches on the door panels and the dash plastics. Now, the interiors share a lot of similarity with the Dzire that we've already seen, especially when you look at this portion of the dash. Where the Dzire has a wooden strip, this has a grey plastic finish over here. But the central portion is completely different. You get circular air vents and an integrated audio system. On the top-end variant, it gets replaced with a 7-inch touchscreen infotainment. There are also some really nice aircon control knobs. The meters and gauges are also sportier. You get a flat bottom steering. And on the whole, the interior looks quite different and quite fresh. The instrument cluster is quite lively and gets brightly lit dials and a high-resolution TFT screen in the center on the top end. You also get a reverse camera, sat-nav, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay on the top-end infotainment system. Storage areas are plenty and convenient, and you do get that required USB and auxiliary sockets. After a good look at the car and the features, we set off on a journey from Pune to Lonavala. We had 4 cars to test and shoot, and although it was a tight schedule, it gave us a variety. But at Autocar we divide and rule, and Gavin drove 2 and me 2 of them. From city traffic to highways to winding roads, we got to test the Swift in all kinds of conditions. The Swift's engines are carried over from the previous version, and it gets the familiar 1.2 K-series motor and the tried and tested but aging Fiat Source 1.3 multi-jet diesel. With this generation, the AMT gearboxes, or AGS as Maruti like to call it, make their debut. And the diesel version gets the auto gear shift too, which is why we chose to drive it first. AMT gearbox, or the auto gearbox, whilst I was in the city and cutting through the traffic, felt quite smooth, and when you're at low speeds the shifts are barely perceptible. It's only when you pick up the pace and you really want to get a move on, put your foot a little flatter, then yes, you do notice the shifts. There is clearly some head nod, but I still have to say for an AMT gearbox, it's pretty smooth. This is because the AGS, as Maruti chooses to call this automated manual transmission, has progressed from its earlier versions. Now, while the kickdowns are quite smooth, it's the upshifts where you feel the head nod or hesitation between gears. For this, the solution is to slip it into manual mode and use it as a regular gearbox. However, in the auto mode, the point to note is that the gentler you are with the throttle, the smoother the transitions through the gears. And the more you demand of it, the more its reactions are made known to you. Now, this is a familiar engine, we've seen it in the Dzire, but what one must remember is that this is a lighter car. So obviously the engine feels punchier, feels stronger over here. In fact, it gets up to triple-digit speeds so easily. And whether you're cutting through city traffic or whether you're cruising out on the highway, it just feels comfortable at all times. Now, while it trundles around easily or cruises comfortably, when you want a sudden burst of power, you do experience the initial lag before the engine gets going, and that compounds the AMT's hesitation. As the expressway gave way to the winding sections in Lonavala, I got to experience the Swift's cornering capabilities. While you can go around the corners at a fairly quick pace, it doesn't feel as hunkered down or as sure-footed as before. What the new Swift also shares with the Dzire is the hardtech platform. It's a clever piece of engineering where various chassis components have been hollowed out in the interest of weight, resulting in a weight saving of around 85 kg, despite the chassis being stiffer, longer and wider. In case you're wondering if the lightweight structure has any negative influence on crashworthiness, it's to the contrary. Suzuki's new platform is beefed up where it matters. The company is confident it will be a lot safer than the outgoing Swift. In fact, the new Swift boasts of meeting crash regulation on pedestrian safety, front offset and side impact. It also comes with dual airbags, ABS, EBD and ISOFIX child seat restraints. As the sun was setting all too quickly, I managed to get a short taste of the petrol manual, and that left me pleased and wanting for a little more time with it. Now, if you enjoy driving, then the powertrain that will make you happy is this one, the petrol. It's punchy, it's free revving, it's smooth, and of course, the manual gearbox just makes it that much more fun. The light controls and slick gear shift will make the Swift easy to punt around town. But the C-pillar does throw up a fat blind spot, which will be an issue especially while reversing or parking. Now, if you're thinking there was a reverse camera mentioned somewhere, well, that only comes with the top variant. Finally, the sun set and my cameraman called it a day. I handed over the reins to Gavin, who was going to test the other two variants.
Well, I got the diesel manual and the petrol auto to test, and first off, me being me, I wanted to try the manual. This car is so much lighter than its predecessors, it feels a whole lot punchier this time around. But you are always aware that you are in the diesel version of the Swift because there is a distinct diesel drone that accompanies you as you accelerate. However, it does feel more refined overall and more silent. The gearbox is light and easy to use, and so is the clutch, which will make the daily grind in the city a breeze. But on the open, winding roads in Lonavala, I had to give it a good workout to counter some of the engine lag. Now, like the Swift Dzire, this steering is lacking in feel. But while in the sedan, it is sort of passable because it's more about practicality. In the Swift hatchback, buyers would prefer a bit more sportiness. The difference from the original Swift is quite substantial, and it has become much softer on the handling front. It doesn't really bite into corners quite as eagerly, and the lighter steering doesn't give you the fun to drive, sporty feel which was such a strong character trait of the original Swift. Well, that was what the diesel manual Swift was like. How about we check out another version? The Petrol AMT. Now, a point to note is that the AMTs are not offered with the top-end variant, so you don't get the touchscreen, you don't get auto projector lamps or DRLs, and you don't get two-tone alloys, nor the rear-view camera. Instead of the touchscreen, sitting on the center of the dash, you get an integrated audio system that has Bluetooth, aux, and USB. It's not all bare bones though. On the Z trim, you do get auto climate control, push-button start, and rear parking sensors. But I have to say, this is a big improvement on the AMT gearboxes of old, and of the two, the petrol AMT does work a lot better than the diesel AMT in the Swift. The shortcomings of an AMT are noticeable more on winding roads like I am on now, or when you are pushing hard. If you are looking for a city roundabout, the combination of the peppy petrol engine and this gearbox would only make daily driving duties that much easier. And while in the petrol, I got into the backseat to experience that section of the car. Now, while there is a lot more space back here, you do feel a little bit hemmed in, and that's thanks to this blacked out section in the C-pillar that eats into your window space. And that is because the door handle is now here. Now, as for ride quality, it does feel a little bit firm at low speeds, but it smoothens out beautifully as you pick up the pace. Overall, the suspension also works really silently, which is nice, and what's more, it gives you this really nice big car feel despite the fact that the car is a whole lot lighter this time. To sum up our short first impressions with all the cars, the new Swift is bigger, better, and has addressed earlier issues of space, critically the boot, which is now more practically sized. Interior quality hasn't taken as much of a leap as we would expect in an all-new car, but it has become more modern in its look, and you get all the features you would expect. Another letdown is the steering, which feels too light at times and robs the Swift of its trademark sporty character. However, the fact that it now has AMT in both diesel and petrol variants widens the appeal of the car, and you get a car that is now more refined in many ways. The pick of the entire lot would be the petrol manual, which feels the most like a Swift and is the most fun to drive while still retaining all of the practicality.
कभी न रुकने वाले जुनून को रफ्तार देता है सर्वो वर्ल्ड क्लास लुब्रिकेंट्स।